Welcome to Avenue M. My name is Joey Taylor.
And I'm Haroon Mogul.
We're two men on a journey of faith and meaning. In each episode, we unpack the moments that shape us, the struggles that build us, and the questions that intrigue us. Last week, Haroon and I explored why conspiracy theories are so compelling. We wrestled with the tension between healthy skepticism and conspiratorial thinking, asking why hidden explanations can feel more satisfying than uncertainty, and why, even when some suspicions turn out to be well-founded, we're still tempted by narratives that claim to explain everything. In part 2, the conversation shifts from diagnosis to practice. If conspiracy theories promise certainty, what habits help us remain grounded in reality? Together, we explore the role of friendship, community, humility, and shared first principles, making the case that the antidote to conspiratorial thinking isn't another grand theory. It's becoming the kind of people who can pursue truth without surrendering to fear.
So you're saying we have to start with first principles or first commitments. And so your approach is to find a common ground that precedes the breakdown in how we perceive the world, or the fissure in how we perceive what's happening in the world.
In the case of religion, if there was an example of Islam, like a self-conception of Islam that said, actually, the central text is not the Quran, I think you would just say that's apostasy, that's a cult, that's not a legitimate form
or
of the religion.
Communism, which is also Islam.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, like, maybe that's the dividing line. Once we can determine what's our first principle, if a system does not align with that first principle, with that foundation, then it definitionally is a conspiracy theory, a cult, outside of the acceptable discourse. It needs to be kind of reined back in. That's what I'm wondering.
What I love about what you just said is because it's so Avenue M. At the start of this episode, I apologized for the way I spoke about Elon Musk. And it's not because I agree with many of Elon Musk's positions. I think a lot of his positions are odious and deeply harmful. And I think that in 100 years, people will probably conclude he caused more harm to the world than he did good. Fortunately, I won't be here in 100 years to have to contend with that on whatever successor podcast exists to Avenue M. But what I did say in that point is I said that I don't want us to do takedowns. I want us to think through ideas. And what I like about what you said, and then I want to add to it something I'm thinking and hearing what you're saying, is you didn't ask us to come up with a theory that beats conspiracy theory. You asked us to find a different place to found a conversation on.
Yeah.
And so maybe that requires, if I'm not reaching too far, an approach that is embodied and local, let's say.
Yeah.
Tangible and even institutional, as opposed to trying to fight on the ground. That perhaps is the very reason those ideas can be taken seriously.
I love that. I mean, I think a really simple thing is if your primary sources of information and community and identity is online in the comments and not in person, that's a real big red flag. And I think maybe you could just like purely put like, how much time are you actually spending in real life with real people who are your neighbors versus how much are you actually spending online? And if there's a dramatic difference in terms of your online much, much more, I just can't imagine you can build a faithful perspective on reality.
Yeah, I would say it's not even a red flag. It's like the ride of the Rohirrim, and they've all got red flags. So it's thousands of red flags charging towards, this example is not making sense, but in this case it would be, was it Osgiliath? Was that the capital of Gondor? It was Minas Tirith. I don't remember. One of these cities, possibly Baltimore, whatever it was. And the conspiracy theory is the ride of the Rohirrim.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of red flags.
This is a terrible. It's just chaos is being unleashed at this point. There's a lot of red flags. That's the point. So what I like about that is that it's true, because if you're getting information from someone you can't trust, or you don't know how to determine if you can even trust, I would be skeptical.
Uh-huh.
And maybe if you don't know if you can trust the person, the better option is to suspend judgment, or to spend less time on that and more time on something else. But I'm going to take that and but I'm going to come at it from the opposite direction, right? Now I'm Aragorn and Legolas with the ghosts, so this is like a third force that's coming into the battlefield.
My gosh.
This is terrible, right? Absolutely terrible. Just what is wrong with me? But you're foundational, right? You're talking about what are our first principles.
Uh-huh.
I would argue that part of the reason we have gotten to where we have gotten in terms of what people believe about the world is because of the decay and decline of our elite. Not the decline. Actually, I don't think we're in the decline of the West necessarily. I think we're in the decline of the elites. That the quality of our elites is so markedly inferior to anything in recent memory that it's hard not to believe that what we're seeing around us is a great nefarious conspiracy, because the only other conclusion is that these guys got no idea what they're doing, and that's even more terrifying. I would rather believe that there's some big plan here to do something than to acknowledge that the people in the room have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
And they're still making decisions based on enthusiastic ignorance. Pete Hegseth's response to the Iran war is more testosterone. Dude, testosterone doesn't design drones. What are you talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
You lost because you didn't prepare your bases and you didn't have enough interceptors and you didn't even think it through. I read once that in the early days of World War II, and this perhaps is the most profound contrast of all, in the early days of World War II, when Britain is getting bombarded by the Nazis, when it looks like Sauron is going to win, that British officials started meeting and planning for the post-war occupation of Germany. Not out of hubris, but because they knew that they would have to think about that.
Yeah.
They had like a 20-year time horizon. And I feel like we've got a 10-minute horizon on the top. And so how can you not believe in a conspiracy theory? Because otherwise, I mean, but this to me is the ultimate defeat of the conspiracy theory if you can stomach what the conclusion. Like when the Russians, okay, why did the Soviet Union collapse? One major reason the Soviet Union collapsed is because they invaded Afghanistan. They killed 500,000 to 1 million Afghans. Just a brutal war. They lost 15,000 soldiers. And they still lost. The land army that beat the Nazis, that had never been defeated in a land war since World War II, was crushed by the last people on earth anyone think it would be crushed by. And then Putin thinks it's a good idea to invade another similarly sized country on his border, and thought he was going to roll over Ukraine in a few days. And instead, I think the numbers I read, like 500,000 Russian soldiers have died in a country that is in demographic freefall. He's basically not only bankrupted Russia, but killed off the generation of healthy men who were supposed to allow for the Russian people to literally continue as a people. If you've got a fertility rate that's, way below replacement, there's no kids. The average Russian man, I think, has a lower life expectancy than men in many other countries. I think it's in like the low 60s, high 50s. And then you decide this is a good time to shovel our youngest men into a war that's just a meat grinder at this point. I mean, that's a level of maliciousness and incompetence that's almost hard to believe. And I think in the past, when our elites did meet in rooms and plan things out, at least they cared enough about everyone else that we kind of all went along with it, right? Like there were benefits. Like, sure, the guys at the top we all knew got more than anyone else, but you could get a good job. I mean, again, certain communities cannot, but like the idea was that the system worked well enough that you felt like things were getting better. So maybe you were not the person who owned GM, but you could drive your own GM car and you could afford this and afford that. And if you looked at your parents' lives, you had more than they did. And if you looked at the arc of the country, right, we were becoming more pluralistic. We were evolving.
In the last week and a half since we're recording, Trump first announced a deal with Saudi Arabia to allow them to do nuclear whatever.
Great idea. Yeah, that's going to help.
The next day, just trying to think through what could be the rationale for that in this moment when we're supposedly trying to rid Iran of their nuclear program. We're going to give the Saudis a nuclear program. Like, how does that make sense for this administration strategically? Like, just the optics of it seem really bad, like.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. And then the very next day, Trump is like, oh yeah, but they got to do the David Accord stuff first. So never mind.
Yeah. Abraham, get your prophets right, Joey.
They got to do the Abraham Accords. My bad.
Yeah.
And then
if you're going to weaponize religion, do it accurately.
Exactly. And then I'm like, oh, there was no rationale. People are just throwing shit against the fan. That's what's happening.
Yeah. And also a genocide.
Exactly. Yes. And so I think like What this makes me think is that, I mean, one of the big questions that we're always trying to kind of toss around is this question of how do we make meaning in this moment? And we as humans are meaning-making entities. We're always trying to make meaning of the things that are happening in our world, in our lives. And when it seems like everything is so chaotic and there's no meaning to be found, if we're not given an opportunity, a system to make meaning with, we're going to go grasping for one. We just are. And I think it's so important for you and me in the context of community and friendship to say, actually, what I'm really scared of right now is this, that I'm living a meaningless life, that I can't find meaning right now, that I don't know how to provide for my kids. I don't know what my future is going to look like. And when we're not willing to like really come face to face with the fears that we really have, man, it makes us susceptible to this kind of conspiratorial thinking.
I will never get Botox so that you can see the faces I'm making when we reference what's happening in the world, because it is so absolutely infuriating.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you a tangible example. I have a long-running back problem due to I was in a car accident when I was very young, wasn't my fault, and as I've gotten older, it's just gotten worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through this 2-year spell, actually just the last 2 years, where I started throwing my back out. The first time it happened, I went on a trip. And so I was like, oh, I traveled, I walked a lot, I was leading the tour. So obviously like I wasn't relaxed. I was in a go, go, go mode. I threw my back out. Took me a week to recover. And then it started happening like every few weeks over just dumb shit. Like it's just embarrassing, right? Forget Odysseus and heroic adventures. I'd be brushing my teeth. Oh, there goes my back. It's like, come on, man. And then, at some point I was like, I'm in my 40s. This is not okay. So I went from place to place trying to figure out what happened. And I found a gym last few weeks. It's like a physical therapy gym. And they do these intense muscle building exercises. They work one-on-one with you and they spend a lot of time with you. And it's been incredible. In 3 weeks, I feel different. I can move differently. And they said, we're rebuilding your body from the ground up. And they spend so much time with me, right? One-on-one. And one day, my trainer wasn't there. So I got a different trainer. And in the course of this workout, he mentioned that he didn't know what my original injury was and set off alarm bells. I'm like, wait, why am I here? And so when I saw my normal trainer again a few days later, I told him that. And he freaked out. And he's like, I can assure you that is not what we're about. I'm going to talk about this internally. Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me what you did. And he apologized like 20 times. The reason I point that out is that part of being a decent human being is being responsible for what is in your remit. If I'm a doctor, I got to know what the questions are to ask. When I go up in front of a classroom, I have to look after all those students. And now we've got people who, to your point, don't care. It's literally a smash and grab operation. There's no other way I can define it. Just make as much money as you can. And if everything burns down, literally or figuratively, it doesn't matter. How else does it make sense? So the Iraq War was a bad idea. But because they handed it to a military that was highly competent, we were able to stretch that bad idea for a really long time. It's sort of like the Hannibal Buress skit where he says he doesn't want to do cardio because then if he gets beat up, he can get beat up for a long time, right? Like his point was that, but the point is the U.S. military was so well built and well run that even if the politicians gave them a bad idea, they would do their damnedest to make it work. And ultimately it didn't work, not because the military couldn't do it, but because nobody knew what they were doing. In the sense that
the idea was so bad. The original idea
the idea was so bad.
Yeah,
you gave a group of very competent individuals an assignment that made no sense. And yet they did their best because that's their professionalism and excellence and so on and so forth. Now it's like, okay, if you knew you were going to attack Iran, why would you be eliminating efficiency standards for appliances, removing EV subsidies, not stockpiling petroleum? Like, these are basic things, right? Like if I know I'm a dad and I'm going on vacation, right? I should probably fill up the tank like just basic common sense stuff that you learn somewhere around like 15 or 16 years old, right? Then like fine tune. And I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe the conspiracy theory is a reflection of the tendency to is a natural human response to your point. It's actually a fully comprehensible human response to degeneration. And so maybe the problem is not the conspiracy theories, although they are a problem. I'm not saying they're not a problem. is that we need to, this is what I love what you said, from the ground up rebuild. What do we agree on?
That strikes me as very true. I think yes. And also from a personal perspective, from a community, relational friendship kind of perspective, I think that we need to have spaces where we're being really brutally honest about how we're encountering that reality in this moment. This whole like stoic, I'm not affected by anything, that kind of conception of masculinity. In a moment when everything is breaking down, it feels like it's breaking down. I think we just have to be more confessional. We have to be more honest about how this is hitting us so that we're not susceptible to explanatory systems that will call the worst out of us, that will make us less human, that will make us less connected, more divided.
Can I go further and say that the explanatory systems actually, maybe not intentionally, but actually harm us?
Absolutely they do. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then I have a question for you. Practically, how does someone do that? Right? Like I have a theory. It's called take your blank friend to the masjid.
What does that mean?
We'll insert ethnic or identity marker there. Right?
Okay.
And the reason what did you think I was thinking, Joey?
I was like, take your what friend? What does that mean? Your stupid friend?
I mean, maybe that too, right? But this is the reason, right? I'm not recommending people just go drop in on people's houses, right? But like I go to the masjid often enough. It all makes sense to me. But if I were to bring, let's say, a colleague of mine from work to the masjid, you can be damn sure I would be looking at the masjid in a totally different way because I would or should be thinking, how is he or she processing this moment? Did someone say something offensive to them? Like, why is that side of the mosque a mess? And in the sense that, would I take them to a Friday sermon? Would I expect them to walk away saying, oh, that's interesting? And I'm not saying that, again, in the sense of feeding conspiracy. What I mean is, I think that part of what this moment also requires is a willingness to see ourselves through each other's eyes.
But I love, interject for a second. That just is so coherent with how you were originally defining religion versus cult. Like, so you're trying to put in accountability structures, right? Like, that's what you're trying to do.
That's an easy accountability structure.
Yeah.
And I would go in, if I went, let's say, to your church, right? I would also go in and come out with questions. and I should know. And I don't mean that in a mean sense, but why do you do it this way? Why do you do it that way? Like, I notice this, I notice that. There are differences. And if we can be generous with each other, we see strengths. Right? And when we learn from each other, like I like certain things. When I went to Adam's church, Knox in Hyde Park, I saw things that I really liked. And I said to myself, oh, it would be cool if we did that.
I love this, Haroon. This is so good because to me, you're making a case for multiculturalism, which I know you love so much, but I think
was that like a jab, Joey?
No, but what I love is that coherent systems need to have accountability from even outside the system. They're not afraid of exposing outsiders to the inner workings of the system. I think that is such a healthy marker because whether it's a cult or a conspiracy theory or whatever, sure, they want to engage with the outside world because they want people to join their stuff. But the secretive, hidden, that kind of stuff is such a marker of it because it won't hold up to scrutiny from the outside world. I think that's an incredibly important thing that you're surfacing.
That is a way to correct some of our assumptions. And then you get to break down some of these theories in a different framework. And I want to go back to time, right? This is something that requires effort. But I think it's the same thing with changing social contexts. It's hard for someone, I would say, let's look at the role of Israel in American foreign policy, just as a good place to close. And then have another episode. It's hard to understand how politicians as different as Obama, Trump, and Biden all assign so much importance to this country without thinking it must have some kind of deeper influence on the country than we can understand or perceive. But at the same time, I would point out that with new technologies like social media and new sources of media, we are ever more aware of what's happening in places like Gaza and the West Bank.
Yep.
And the narrative has shifted, not as fast as it should, but it has shifted.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it in the politics and the election of who's coming to power. part of the challenge is also that we have a system that is ever less democratic because there's more and more money in politics. So change happens even more slowly than it should. But it's not that you can't have change. It's that sometimes it takes a long time to have that change, and that is painful and that is not okay. But I would prefer that people see what is happening around us as realities that we can make dents in, as opposed to sit back and say, it's all orchestrated. I have nothing to do with this. But we do, whether it's as small as I can link people together who might not otherwise be linked together, whether that's sports or a visit to your mosque or an educational institution or politics or what have you. And you're right. I don't think that happens unless you build that common ground.
Yeah, I think participation in conspiracy theories often feels like exercising agency. It often feels like, quote unquote, making a difference, making an impact. And it almost always is not. It's retreating into some silo that nobody else can comprehend or engage with. For me, I often feel this tension, wanting to do good in the world and often feeling like the efforts and the activities that I'm leading or are participating in aren't enough. They're not even close to enough to affect the systemic kind of challenges and chaos that I'm seeing. And in my best of times, I want to give myself permission to say that's okay. Yeah. Maybe it's okay. It's not revolutionary. It's not utopic, but it's realistic in the sense of I know I need to find a way to exercise agency as a way to counter despair. And this isn't enough, but it's something.
So then our conclusion is we need to be the elites we are waiting for.
Yes.
No, I don't mean that facetiously. I don't mean as in you and I are going to go run a government. I don't mean that. I mean, you said you want masculinity more confessional. I also want a masculinity that's more participatory.
Yes.
I can't necessarily affect what's happening over there, but I can meaningfully affect what's happening within my orbit, within my remit. Like the trainer who has to ask questions, the doctor who has to go through a checklist, the dad before the trip who fills the tank, whatever it might be, right? Like we all have remits. What is it we are doing to rebuild the connective tissue our world is built on and still survives on, even as we know there are other people who are effectively tearing at and hacking at that connective tissue?
Yeah, I love that so much. I think, to be confessional for a second, I think that the moments I am most pulled by conspiracy thinking is moments when I feel overwhelmed by the requirements of being a dad, of being a husband, of being me. And I also know that when I give into that temptation of thinking in the more conspiratorial way, getting down the rabbit holes of Twitter, X, whatever it is, I am a much worse man, person, father, husband. I just am. It makes me less of a father and a husband and a person when I give into that kind of thinking. Whether it's like legitimately because I'm not spending as much time or energy thinking about or engaging with, or because it's feeding into parts of me that make me more suspicious, that make me more anxious, that make me more embittered, all those things. So I think that makes just a ton of sense. That really resonates with me.
It's the two questions you brought up about Tucker Carlson when we had that episode a few weeks back. Like, what is this doing to me? Not one is what does he want, but that's not a question I can control.
Right.
And then the question I can't control. And so can I be confessional as well, but more confessional? Because a confessional masculinity would still be competitive. Right? Because would it really be...
You're gonna one up
yeah,
my
like
confessional.
what the hell is that? We're gonna be equal? What is this, socialism? So we don't want that, right? Do you ever find, just as an aside, that you break all the categories yourself? Like there's a lot of things I like that are quote unquote stereotypically liberal. Like I think everyone should have healthcare. I like trains. I think America should have high-speed trains. I also just really like a burger. You know, like you remember that episode of Parks and Recreation?
Yes.
Where Ron makes the burger and it's just, he's like, I don't care what you do with it. There's ketchup over there. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. Right. And that's me. But to be confessional, so when I went to college, right. And this is interesting to me because you asked how I teach my kids about how to think about the world. Right. So maybe let's be very clear. I want to teach them a religion that empowers them, that does not constrain or reduce them.
Yeah.
And I went to NYU, And we would go to Friday prayers. And if I tell you the sermons we heard, they were amazing. We had one guy who went for over an hour when we told him we had 30 minutes, and we were renting the space from a Catholic church. So it's not just that we have schedules, like we've literally only, like, it's not our space, right? And this kind of thing happened regularly. We had one guy who said every Muslim is a liar. And I was like, okay, if I want Islamophobia, I'll just go into the future and listen to Elon Musk with the technology he should be inventing instead of, wasting his time with X. We had one guy who said, this is amazing, I'm not making it up, that he really needs to get married. And he couldn't focus because the women in the congregation, not just like abstract women, were distracting him. And it was like, this is so awkward, right? Like, what is happening? Right? We had one guy who dropped a 4-letter word, but fortunately was so distracted by his own dropping of said word that he shortened the sermon and we at least got out in time, right? So it was a little sometimes. But anyway, for a really long time, we just kind of put up with this because they looked a certain way and had a certain authority. But when it finally clicked in our brains, we were like, wait a minute. Like, why do they get to give sermons that are so awful just because of some preconceived criteria that someone else has placed in our minds? And then when that moment clicks, that's when the dam breaks. And I think every dam of that such variety does break. But at the same time, I made a mistake because then I put myself in that place to give sermons without the requisite moral formation. I didn't know I didn't have it. I didn't know what I didn't know to bring Donald Rumsfeld back since we brought the Iraq War in. And when I found Sufism, it was like a balm, BALM, just so that everyone is
got it.
Calm,
got it.
Like a balm. And it felt like exactly what I needed.
Uh-huh.
It was beautiful. It was introspective. It was profound. And here's the weirder part. When I did and recited the litanies that I was taught, I felt real world consequences that could not be anything but transcendently sanctioned or provoked.
Sure.
Like I started having dreams of things that were it was very strange. Like I would have a dream and then that encounter would happen. It was really surreal. And so you could see the intoxicating effect until I realized both conceptually and experientially that the authority that was accruing in this model of Sufism to the sheikh, to the leader, was inherently susceptible to abuse, and the abuse was happening. Spiritual abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse. Because too much authority was centered in that one individual.
Yeah.
There was no accountability. So I kept many of the practices, but I left that space. And so what I tell my students is always twofold. The first is, don't ever let me be the only person you take knowledge from.
Yeah.
And then the second is that even if we have affirmative conversations about what we believe, like our particular tradition, in my case, Sunni Islam, I want you to go to and spend time with other Muslim traditions, not to create a generic version of that or to dilute it, but to know that there are other people who have come to other conclusions with seriousness and rigor. And you need to check your own internal algorithm.
Totally.
That to me is the antidote to the conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
It's not another theory, it's lived reality.
Phew. Preach, man. That's so good.
I shouldn't preach. I just told you that was the problem.
You should now. Right? You should now. That's great. That's so good.
I mean, now I do as Xavier, but it's weird because sometimes the people in the room know more than I do. And I'm like, why am I here? Right? Like, oh, look, it's the professor of Islamic theology. Let me tell you about theology.
I love the journey from, actually, we have ownership and agency here, but it requires something of us. It requires formation. It requires a level like to take it seriously. And then I really love the idea that we're doing our very best to make sense of the world, but our narrative isn't a totalizing one. It's never going to be complete. And so we have to continue to encounter difference and say with humility, they have something to offer as well. And maybe the main message from me in this conversation is that I need to resist the temptation of panaceas, of ideologies, of totalizing narratives. So thanks, man. This is great, dude.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Zach Swellbar for recording our theme music. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know what questions we should be asking and who else we should be talking to.